Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the series premiere of Kamen Rider Gotchard, our brand new Rider series, and the first time in a while I've been covering a new Rider series regularly. As Rider content is becoming more regular to the channel again, I will be covering this weekly for at least 5 or so weeks until a period of time where it feels like I get the gist of the show and how people are responding to the videos. Whether or not I continue to cover it weekly will just kind of depend on the response to the videos, but I will try to keep up with it regularly and at the very least do catch-up videos if I don't do mustard videos. Oh, that was a lame joke. I don't do weekly videos. But anyway, let's dive in. So this series from the start, from a lot of the press conferences and trailers and stuff, seems like it was going back to basics a little bit after a little bit more experimental stuff with Geats, and it very much feels like that. It's a very classic back to basics, efficient but entertaining pilot that sets up a lot of things in a way that there's not a whole lot new going on here, but there was a lot I quite enjoyed. But it definitely felt back to basics and more like a generic Rider pilot, and definitely your classic generic rushed Toku pilot, which I have this criticism all the time in Sentai and Riders. I would really love for them to adapt the idea of like a 2-part premiere more so. You know, they do that with their 2-part episodes of the week, and I get it, like the culture and the way they handle it is different, but these series have almost too many episodes, and which is why it's always ridiculous to me that we always have to cram everything into the pilot. With that being said, it honestly was pretty much fine in terms of its pacing. Like, yeah, it was rushed like all of them, but I've seen worse rushed ones. If anything, it kind of reminded me of, this is a weird comparison and it has nothing to do with the plot, but of Lightspeed Rescue's pilot, in the sense that it feels rushed for sure, and you wish it was a little bit more, like, spaced out, but also it's very efficient and gets everything done it needs to in a way that it's like, yeah, this is rushed, but they did a solid job of setting everything up, and I don't feel it takes anything away. You set up with our serious character, who I believe is supposed to be, I forget the girl character. I'm going to take me a while to remember anyone's names, but our main girl character, I think it's her dad, if I remember right, from the press conference and stuff like that, but he's like on the run with the belt from our villain group this year in this mysterious dimension, the Ouroboros dimension or something like that. And the villains are very interesting. They very much so, just in terms of the way they are designed, remind me of like early 2000s Sentai villains. I talked about this sort of recently in a different video, but I know we've done humanoid-like villains in Sentai and stuff like that in recent years, but that sort of like costume female character, kind of like Vipera, very much just makes me think of like early 2000s Sentai, but that's what that reminds me of. But he's on the run from them, and he sends like the belt and cards off to find somebody that's chosen off on the steam liner. And of course it's going to find our main character, who's the only character name I remember as of this moment, which is Houtarou, who is working at his parents' shop. It's his mom's shop. The dad's missing, I guess, and they even have a like they Ash Ketchum'd his dad. Like, it's like, oh, this is the dad. It's clearly going to be a mystery later. Obviously, it's not the guy from the beginning, because it's supposed to be the girl's dad, and he would probably be like, Dad? Unless, like, the mom would never let him take the business card off of his face. But that's clearly obstructed for a reason for the future. Regardless, he works at this restaurant, and, like, his whole thing is he's trying to find his gotcha, effectively, like, his purpose and, like, thing that clicks. And he's also always experimenting with food mashups. Absolutely random call out, but not necessarily because I always reference Psych, but it reminded me of that mashup food truck that Sean and Gus opened in the final season. Anyway, that's kind of to go into the alcohol theme, the alchemy theme of, you know, mixing and matching things together. And he's very much so that specialist boy, wide-eyed, eccentric character. Not like an annoying one like Gira, who he's laughing and saying catchphrases. I mean, he does have a catchphrase, but it's definitely back to basics with that. Admittedly, he does have some endearing qualities, like just the idea of trying to find your purpose or whatever is pretty relatable to most people, and I didn't find him to be absolutely annoying or anything. It's definitely one of those on-the-fence type situations where this could go almost either way. I can end up loving him, or he could end up being an obnoxious lead, or he could kind of just sit somewhere in the middle like Iki did for Revice. It just, regardless, it is kind of unfortunate to go back to that protagonist. Not that I wanted to see another ace right away, but I just am a little bit annoyed by how often Rider has a protagonist that feels like it's cut from the same cloth, and I don't know why they want their protagonists to always be these little twerpy characters. Regardless, he's not that bad so far. I just wanted to talk about that at the beginning. And there's a lot of stuff just kind of about finding your purpose. We introduced our main female character, whose like destiny seems to be written for her. We introduce like the mystery of her having this ring as he's following her, and that's when he encounters the little Hopper character, who initially it's kind of in a funny scene where it looks like it's going to be a foreboding enemy, and it's just Hopper, and all it does is say its name like a Pokemon. Like, admittedly, I find it kind of adorable, but it also feels like it's just not quite working for me. It feels like it's supposed to be a buddy character, but because it only says his name like a Pokemon, it's slightly awkward. Maybe it'll feel more natural as the series goes on, but right now it feels just kind of forced. But she has this ring that allows her to do alchemy, and it transforms her into sort of this outfit. And I really like this aspect of the series, as that happens to the teacher later too, when they reveal he's involved. And this was in the trailers and stuff, but I think this is really neat. I think that it adds this kind of interesting, cool dimension, just to have these characters that are transforming into something other than a rider. Although I feel fairly certain both of these characters will suit up as a rider before the series ends. I like this idea of having these characters that can help out in a different way, and the alchemy way of like fighting and solving problems has some unique visual stuff. So I hope that that is kind of an element that sticks around. Like even once we get them maybe becoming writers, I would love for them to keep one or two of those types of characters around, because I thought it was kind of cool and varied. But she runs into the Chemi that shows up, which is the train, which winds up taking Houtarou away because he is the chosen one, and the belt guy kind of explains everything to him, and he's like, from this moment you'll be a Kamen Rider, and shows him all the cards in a way that very much looks like it's laid out like, you know, the holders they have for the toys. And what's cool is when he gets it, it kind of like gives him this like mind flash of how to henshin, which is kind of cool that, you know, most times even if they're a novice, they immediately know what to do, and the idea that this sort of intersects it into his brain was kind of neat. And then like of course, all of the cards except for his core 2 ones escape, setting the stage for like the status quo of the series as he's brought back, and they're all running wild everywhere. And what you actually have is one of the main villains takes one of the Chemis, the Mantis one, and corrupts it and grafts herself onto it to create the monster, which I'm like, I watched the trailers and stuff, but I didn't remember that aspect. I'm curious if it's always going to be one of the main villains, or whether it's going to be like them grafting it onto other people too. I'm going to assume that's what's going to happen, but still, it's kind of a unique setup for the way that works, where like the Chemi aren't inherently bad or anything, it's more about how they're used, and the idea of main villains just randomly using ones throughout the series was pretty cool. But then we get our first transformation and fight, and as I've stated before in previous videos when we first saw it, I really dig the belt. I like that it's more minimalist. I love the sounds for it. I like the voice. I like that there's like minimal jingles. Not that I don't like jingles, but I think they've gotten carried away in past years where it's too sing-songy, which can get annoying in general, but especially once you get more characters involved, they all clash over each other. So I like that I not only like the voice, but that it's not too over the top. And he also gets like a full-on, like almost Sentai Henshin-esque sequence like saber, which some people have mixed feelings on. I don't necessarily mind, especially since they don't always show them all the time. But when he first transforms, he actually transforms into like a final attack ride type thing, where he's like, this isn't what I was expecting, but oh well. But then of course he figures out how to actually transform normal, and it kind of, you know, puts the armor over him, kind of showing the gimmick of what the figures will have and stuff. And I have to still say, top tier suit. I absolutely love this suit. It's a very like classic feeling suit, but also with something new. I love the goggles echoing stuff like Karame Silver and Digidestin characters, and the way the suit shines looks really cool. It makes it stand out, and also reminds me of those old Beetleborgs figures from the 90s. But I just kind of like that it's kind of designed like those series like Double or 01 or even Kuga, where they're like, let's look at the core design of a rider and then kind of modernize it in our own way, and it looks really cool. And we get a pretty solid and fun first fight as we sort of learn the ropes on how to work everything. I like the way the finisher works, where it kind of breaks apart his little armor and then it comes back together. It's overall pretty cool. And then it sets up, you know, this generally just sets up the overall status quo. Like I said, the monsters out in the world, and then once he defeats it, he gets the card, so now he'll be able to use that next week for whatever, and sets the stage for that there. And yeah, it was very back to basics, very much classic Toku pilot vibes, very much Forze vibes because of like the school setting. Honestly, I thought my interpretation from the trailer initially was that the whole school was going to be based around alchemy and these rings, almost like a Harry Potter-like school, but for alchemy. But I guess it's like a secret society and stuff like that. And it certainly did set up things about the world and about the chemis and people forgetting about it, and the general mythology like lay down that they always have. Leaves me with questions and curiosities about it. I wasn't like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever, but I really did enjoy myself. Like I said, it was very efficient in getting things done. I wish things could breathe as always, but I think that it did a good job of laying things down in a way that even though it felt rushed, it didn't feel like that was a detriment of it. And I have to say, like, I really do like a lot of the aesthetics and the way the series is set up, and I couldn't help but think that like kids that are watching this and growing up with it are probably going to be super stoked about it. I've thought about that with a couple things recently where I'm like, man, this is something that would have gotten me even more excited as a kid. Like, there are very few things nowadays that can bring me that same excitement as when I was a kid. Like, with one of them only that I can think of off the top of my head is when like a new generation of Pokemon is released. But every now and then I'll see something that makes me think like, you know, I imagine that this would have been super exciting for me as a kid, and this is probably exciting for the next generation of kids, which kind of makes me happy that they're going to get to experience like that feeling of excitement I did when I was younger. And just the aesthetics of this with like the collectible cards, like, and the monsters hit so many of those sort of collectible monster Yu-Gi-Oh buttons, and I think it's got a fun vibe for that, which I really did appreciate. And even though it's very back to basics, and I'm slightly disappointed by that because I liked seeing Geats be so different and Sentai's been so experimental, it was also kind of nostalgic and fun to dive back into a classic Rider pilot. So didn't blow me away, but I did enjoy myself enough that I'm looking forward to watching more. I would give this episode a 3 out of 5. And hey, there's always a chance this series could surprise us and do more different things than you think. Revice had a lot of generic stuff in terms of its structure, but also I think brought some unique stuff to the table, and even stuff like, you know, King Odra surprised us more than we thought, so there's a chance we could get more surprises as it goes. But what did you guys think of the premiere for Kamen Rider Gotchard? Are you going to continue to watch it? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for all my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.